Ladies and gentlemen, you know what makes manipulation so dangerous? You don't realize it's happening until you're already blaming yourself for someone else's bad behavior. Today, we're talking about how a narcissistic husband can twist the truth, shift the blame, and keep his wife questioning her own reality, and how to spot it before it swallows you whole. Gaslighting isn't always loud. Most of the time, it's quiet. It doesn't walk in the room wearing a neon sign that says, "I'm here to manipulate you." It comes in small phrases, small corrections, small moments where reality gets bent just enough to make you stop and think, wait, maybe I'm wrong. And that's exactly the point. It starts with something harmless. At least it looks harmless. You might say, "You said you'd be home at 7. And he replies, "No, I told you I'd be late. You must have measured." Now, maybe you really did miss. It happens. But when it starts happening over and over on big things and little things, it's no longer about missharing. It's about rewriting what happened. So his version becomes the truth and yours starts to feel shaky. The more it happens, the more you start checking yourself. You go from trusting what you saw, what you heard, what you remember, to second guessing it all. He says, "I never said that." He says, "You're too sensitive." He says, "You're imagining things," and you start to believe maybe he's right. Not because he's actually right, but because the repetition wears you down. Gaslighting works because it's slow. It's not one big argument that knocks you off your feet. It's death by 1,000 paper cuts. Each time he distorts the truth, it's like taking one brick out of the wall of your self-rust. Eventually the wall crumbles, and once your self-rust is gone, it's game over. Because now he gets to be the one who decides what's real and what's not. You might think, well, I'd never let that happen to me. But here's the thing, nobody lets it happen. It happens because you love this person, because you want to believe the best about them, because you assume they're telling you the truth. Narcissists count on that. They take that trust and flip it into a tool for control. Here's an example. You bring up something that hurt you. Maybe he embarrassed you in front of friends. Instead of saying, "I'm sorry," he says, "That's not what happened." You're remembering it wrong, where everyone was laughing with you, not at you. And the longer you stand there trying to explain, the more you feel like you're being dramatic. And it doesn't stop with events. It leaks into emotions. You say, "I feel hurt," and he says, "You're overreacting," or "You're too emotional." Notice the shift now. He's not even arguing about the facts. He's arguing about your right to feel how you feel. That's the advanced stage of gaslighting. It's not just taking away your version of events. It's taking away your ability to trust your own emotions. Once you stop trusting yourself, you start leaning on him to explain what's going on, to tell you whether you're right or wrong, to validate if what you feel is okay. And if he's the one giving you the map, he also gets to choose where it leads. Spoiler, it's never toward you feeling empowered. The hardest part about spotting gaslighting is that you're usually in it before you even have a name for it. You just know you feel confused a lot. You find yourself apologizing for things you didn't do. Conversations leave you walking away less certain than when you started. And there's a heaviness in your gut that tells you something's off, even if you can't proud of it. And here's the reality. You don't need a smoking gun to know the truth. If you feel like you have to keep defending your reality to the person who's supposed to love you the most, that's already enough. Healthy relationships don't make you doubt your own mind. So when you catch yourself thinking, maybe I'm crazy, pause. Ask yourself, who benefits if I believe that? Because I promise you, in a marriage where gaslighting is happening, the answer is never you. Isolation doesn't always look like being locked in a room. Most of the time it looks like him being concerned about the people you spend time with. It looks like him asking, "Why do you hang out with her? She doesn't really get you." Or, "Your family's so negative. Don't you feel drained after talking to them?" At first it sounds like he's protecting you, like he's looking out for your well-being. But slowly, without even realizing it, your circle starts shrinking. It's never, "Don't see your friends." It's, "We've been so busy. Why don't you just stay home with me tonight?" It's not, "Don't talk to your mom." It's, every time you talk to her, you come back upset. Why do that to yourself? He plants little seeds of doubt about the people in your life. And those seeds grow into distance. Before you know it, the group text you used to laugh with goes quiet. You stop showing up to the lunches you used to look forward to. You stop calling the friend who's known you since high school because you don't want to deal with the argument that follows. You think you're making those choices for peace. But the truth is, he's redirecting your connections until he becomes the only one you rely on. Isolation works because it feels like love at first. He wants your time. He wants you all to himself. And let's be honest, in the beginning, that can feel flattering. You think, wow, he really values me. He really wants me close. But over time, it stops being about wanting you near and starts being about keeping you away from anyone who might hold up a mirror and say, this isn't right. That's the danger. When you're isolated, you lose the outside perspective. You lose the people who remind you who you were before this relationship. You lose the ones who would notice the changes and ask the hard questions. And without those voices, his voice becomes the loudest and eventually the only one. It's not just about cutting off people. It's about cutting off resources. Maybe you quit your job because wants to take care of you. Maybe you stop going to that workout class because it's too much hassle. Little by little, the things that connect you to your independence start fall away. And when you don't have your own income, your own routine, your own support system, leaving becomes a mountain instead of a door. And here's the tricky part. Sometimes you defend it yourself. You say, I just grew apart from those friends. You say, I'm just focusing on my marriage. You say, it's just a busy season. That's exactly how it works. It's not a sudden cut. It's a slow fade, slow enough that you don't realize what's gone until you look up one day and the room is empty. When isolation sets in, you start living in his world with his rules, his stories, his version of events. And if something goes wrong, there's no one to turn to who hasn't already been fed aside. He's controlled the narrative before you even knew there was one. That's why when people say, why didn't she just leave? They don't understand. By the time she's ready to, there's no one left to catch her. And maybe that's where you find yourself now. You're still in contact with a few people, but it's not the same. Conversations feel guarded. You share less because you don't want to deal with the fallout at home. And so, you keep more inside. But the more you keep inside, the heavier it gets. That heaviness is a sign. It's your gut telling you that human connection isn't supposed to feel like a risk. Love doesn't cut you off from your people. It celebrates that you have them. The moment you realize you've been standing in the middle of a shrinking circle, you also realize this. Someone's been drawing those lines, and it wasn't you. Blame shifting is one of those tactics that can make you feel like you're in a constant game of emotional dodgeball. Except you never get to throw the ball back. No matter what happens, no matter whose actions caused it, somehow the finger ends up pointing at you. And the scary part is, it doesn't even have to make sense. It just has to be said enough times until it feels true. And it might start with something small. He's late picking you up, but instead of saying, I'm sorry, he says, well, if you'd been clear about the time, I wouldn't have been late. Notice the flip. Now, it's not about him being late. It's about you not communicating well enough. You bring up that he forgot to pay a bill. And suddenly it's, if you didn't distract me so much when I'm busy, I would have remembered. The issue changes hands so fast, you barely have time to notice the switch. Over time, this becomes the rhythm of the relationship. Any problem, big or small, passes through a filter where his responsibility is removed and yours is added. You're left carrying not only your mistakes, but his too. And that weight is exhausting. What makes blame shifting so effective is the way it plays on your natural empathy. Most people, when someone says they hurt them, want to listen, want to take responsibility where it's fair. But with a narcissistic partner, that empathy becomes a trap. They know you'll take a hard look at yourself. They know you'll think, maybe I could have done better. And while you're busy replaying the situation in your head, they are already off the hook. The other dangerous thing about this is how it erodes your confidence in your own judgment. At first, you might push back. No, that's not what happened. But after a while, you start thinking, maybe it is my fault. Maybe I am too sensitive. Maybe I do overreact. Once that seed is planted, they don't even have to work as hard. You start blaming yourself before they even have to say it. It's not always about arguments either. Sometimes it shows up in the way they play the victim. You call them out for something hurtful and they tell you a story about how they've been under so much stress, how no one understands the pressure they're under, how you don't appreciate everything they do. Suddenly, you're comforting them for the thing they did to you. That's not an accident. That's strategy. And the longer you live in that dynamic, the more it shapes your reality. You stop expecting apologies because you know they won't come. You start watching your every word, not to keep the peace, but to make sure there's nothing he can turn back on you. You edit yourself before you even speak. That's not just walking on eggshells. That's living in a world where the floor is covered in glass and you're barefoot. Blame shifting also has a way of spilling into how you see yourself outside the relationship. You might start thinking you're difficult to be around, that you always cause problems, that you're the one who needs to fix things, and that self-image sticks, even in situations that have nothing to do with him. You find yourself over-apologizing, over-explaining, over-owning things that aren't yours to carry. The truth is, someone who loves you should be able to look at their part in a problem without handing it to you like it's your job to solve. Healthy relationships don't require you to take responsibility for someone else's actions just to keep the peace. If every road leads back to your fault, that's not conflict resolution. That's control. The real cost of blame shifting isn't just the unfairness of it in the moment. It's the way it slowly rewrites your story until you start seeing yourself through the distorted lens they've been holding up. And once you start believing that version of you, they don't even need to shift the blame anymore because you're already doing it for them. Love bombing followed by withdrawal is like being handed the warmest blanket you've ever felt, and then having it yanked away the moment you start to relax. It's a cycle designed to keep you hooked, not safe. At the beginning, the affection is overwhelming in the best possible way. He's attentive, present, telling you everything you've ever wanted to hear. The texts are constant, the compliments flow like water. He makes you feel like the most important person in the room because right then you are. And that high is intoxicating. You think this is it. This is what love is supposed to feel like. You build trust in that warmth. You open yourself up more. You let your guard down. But here's the catch. That intense wave of affection isn't the steady baseline. It's bait. And the second he feels secure that you've taken it, the pullback starts. The messages slow down. The compliments turn into criticism. The attention you were swimming in starts to dry up. You go from feeling like his priority to feeling like an afterthought. And just when you're starting to wonder if you imagine the whole thing, he turns the affection back on full blast. Suddenly he's planning date nights, showering you with love, telling you how lucky he is. You feel relieved. You think the rough patch is over, but it's not over. It's just reset. That's the hook. The contrast between the warmth and the cold makes the warmth feel even more powerful when it comes back. It's like a desert making you grateful for a single drop of water. Pretty soon, you're not asking for consistent kindness. You're chasing that high you got at the beginning. And because he can give it, you tell yourself he must want to. You just have to figure out what you did wrong so you can keep it coming. That's where the control sets in. You start adjusting your behavior, trying to avoid the cold stretches. You watch what you say. You give more than you can afford to give. You compromise in ways you never thought you would, because you've had a taste of the affection and you want it back. And every time you get it, it feels like proof that he really does love you. So the times he's distant feel like your fault. What makes this pattern so exhausting is that it's unpredictable on the surface, but very predictable underneath. On the surface, you never know when the switch will flip. But underneath, the rule is simple. Affection is a reward. Distance is a punishment. If you please him, he turns on the charm. If you upset him, even in the smallest way, he pulls away. And because human beings crave connection, especially from someone we love, you learn to do whatever it takes. To avoid the punishment, it's worth saying withdrawal isn't always silent treatment. In a dance, it's just a colder tone, less eye contact, or him being too busy to engage. Other times, it's a wall of indifference that makes you feel invisible. Either way, the message is clear. Your emotional stability depends on his mood. And that kind of dependence is dangerous because it keeps you in a constant state of working for approval instead of knowing you already deserve it. Over time, this cycle can make you forget what healthy love even looks like. You start thinking love is supposed to feel like a chase, like something you earn. You stop expecting steady, consistent care and start measuring love in bursts of intensity. And because those bursts are so powerful, they overshadow the long stretches of neglect in between. That's how the hook stays in. You focus on the good times and minimize the bad because the good feels so good when you've been starving for it. But real love isn't a roller coaster that leaves you dizzy and uncertain. Real love doesn't make you feel like you're always one mistake away from losing it. The truth is, if someone can turn their affection on and off like a faucet, it's not because you're failing to earn it. It's because they're using it to keep you exactly where they want you. Controlling the narrative is about more than just telling stories. It's about shaping the reality other people see so that his image stays spotless and yours becomes questionable. A narcissistic husband knows that perception is power. If he can control what people believe, he can do almost anything and still come out looking like the good guy. And the way he does it is rarely obvious. It starts with charm around other people. He's attentive, funny, generous. He remembers small details about them, asks the right questions, makes them feel important. He knows how to work a room in a way that leaves people thinking, wow, she's lucky to have him. And you sit there smiling along, knowing this is the highlight reel, the version of him that exists for an audience. Not the one you live with at home. But it's not just about how he acts. It's about what he says. Little comments dropped into conversations to plant seeds. He might tell a friend, she's been so stressed lately. I'm really worried about her. On the surface, that sounds caring, but what it does is start creating a picture of you as unstable. If you ever reach out to that friend to talk about the relationship, there's already a story in place that frames your words as emotional or overreacting. This narrative control also works in reverse. If he does something hurtful, he gets ahead of it. He tells people his version before you even have the chance to speak. And in his version, he's the reasonable one, the one who tried, the one who was pushed too far. By the time your side of the story comes out, it's fighting uphill against what everyone already thinks they know. It doesn't always stay limited to friends or family. Sometimes it extends to your own support systems, coworkers, neighbors, even people in your community. He might casually mention how much you misunderstand him or how hard you are to please, framing it as a joke. But enough of those jokes start to stick in people's minds. And if the day comes when you need to tell them what's really going on, their first thought won't be, she's telling the truth. It'll be, but he's always been so nice. The thing is, when you're living in this, you start to feel trapped in a double bind. If you stay quiet, the story he tells becomes the only one anyone hears. But if you speak up, you risk sounding defensive, which only seems to prove his point. That's by design. He wants you to feel like there's no winning move. So the easiest choice is to say nothing at all. Another layer to this is how he uses your own vulnerability against you. Maybe you've confided in him about your insecurities or past struggles. Those details become part of the story he tells others, not as accusations, but as concerns. He frames himself as the patient, understanding husband who's been dealing with so much. And the more he does that, the more people are inclined to see you through his lens instead of their own. And here's where it hits hardest. When people you thought you could count on start questioning you, they don't see the coldness at home. They don't hear the cutting remarks behind closed doors. They see the polished version of him and wonder if maybe you're being too harsh. That isolation we talked about earlier deepens because now even your own allies feel like they've been pulled to his side. Controlling the narrative isn't just about protecting his image. It's about damaging yours in subtle ways, so that if things ever fall apart, he walks away with sympathy and you're left defending yourself. It's preemptive damage control. And the longer it goes on, the more it feels like he's built a wall of perception around himself. One you can't break through, no matter how much truth you throw at it. Because once people believe a version of a story, they rarely want to rewrite it. And he knows that. That's why for him, controlling what they see is just as important as controlling what you feel. The goal isn't just to win in private, it's to win in public too. When you step back and look at the whole picture, the gaslighting, the isolation, the blame shifting, the love bombing followed by withdrawal, and the way he controls the narrative, you start to see the same thread running through it all. None of these tactics are accidents. They're deliberate, calculated ways to keep you doubting yourself, dependent on him, and too worn down to push back. And here's the truth that can be the hardest to accept. Love should never require you to lose yourself in order to keep it. If someone has to tear down your confidence, cut off your connections, and rewrite your reality just to stay in your life, that's not love. That's control dressed up as care. And the moment you name it for what it is, you take back the first piece of power he's been trying to keep from you all along.